This is lecture number 96, and our subject today is primitive communism in the British Isles. This is supporting volume 7 on communism in Europe when it appears later this year. And we're going to start with, as usual, the lower Paleolithic hunting and gathering bands in the British Isles, where the earliest evidence of human occupation dates to 900,000 years ago at the Happisburgh site on the Norfolk coast. Now here we have stone tools associated with footprints. After that, the oldest evidence includes human fossils at the Boxgrove site in Sussex, and they date at 500,000 BP. At this time, Britain was and had been permanently connected to the continent by a chalk ridge that ran between southeast England and northeast France, called the Wild Artois Anticline. The White Cliffs of Dover are a contemporary reminder of the ancient ridge created when a megaflood broke it in half during the Anglian glaciation that began around 425,000 BP, creating the English Channel. After that, Britain became an island when sea levels rose during interglacials. Homo Sapiens neanderthalensis fossils, dating to 400,000 years ago, have been found at Swanscombe in Kent and at Pont Newydd in North Wales, dating to 225,000 BP. Britain appears to have been unoccupied by humans between 180,000 and 60,000 years ago. But by 40,000 years ago, people had returned, and the Upper Paleolithic began in Britain. However, even their occupations were brief and intermittent due to a climate which swung between low temperatures with a tundra habitat and severe ice ages, which made Britain uninhabitable for long periods. The last of these, the Younger Dryas, ended around 11,700 years ago, and since then Britain has been continuously occupied. Now, Britain and Ireland were then joined to the continent, but rising sea levels cut the land bridge between Britain and Ireland by about 11,000 years ago. A large plain between Britain and continental Europe, known as Doggerland, persisted much longer, probably until around 7,600 BP. By around 6,000 BP, the island was populated by people with a Neolithic culture. However, no written language of the pre-Roman inhabitants of Britain has survived. Therefore, the history, culture, and way of life of pre-Roman Britain are known mainly through archaeological finds. Paleolithic, that is, Old Stone Age Britain, is the period of the earliest known occupation of Britain by humans, and this huge period saw many changes in the environment, encompassing several glacial and interglacial episodes greatly affecting human settlement in the region. The inhabitants at this time were bands of hunters and gatherers who roamed northern Europe, following herds of animals and living by fishing. Now, at the Happisburgh site, the early one we mentioned before, the first known settlement in northern Europe, was uncovered by a team of scientists and archaeologists from the Natural History Museum, the British Museum, University College of London, and Queen Mary and University of London. The British Museum funded the excavation. Now, archaeological excavations on Happisburgh Beach revealed that ancient humans lived in Britain more than 800,000 years ago, making them the earliest northern Europeans. The site lies on an ancient route of the River Thames that flowed into the sea 90 miles north of its present estuary. The river was large and slow, flowing with freshwater pools and marshes. Salt marsh and coast were nearby. The floodplain was dominated by grass, supporting a diverse range of herbivores, such as mammoth, rhino, and horse. Predators would have included hyenas, saber-toothed cats, and humans. Now, more than 70 flint tools and flakes were unearthed on the Happisburgh foreshore. They are human-made with carefully crafted sharp edges that may have been for skinning and butchering animals, and these finds are by far the earliest known evidence of humans in Britain, dating to 800,000 BP. Most of the artifacts were found in situ during excavation, with additional pieces retrieved through sieving of all of the excavated sediments. Most were found in a series of gravel layers at the northern edge of the ancient river channel known as Happisburgh Site 3. From just below beach level in the northernmost trench The gravels deepen in the southernmost trench to about 2 meters below beach level. Earlier deposits underlying the gravel layers were recorded and sampled. A further 2 meters of channel sediment has been identified beneath, but it is too deep to excavate because of the water level. Now, fossil plants, pine cones, and pollen, along with fossil beetles and small animals, such as voles. Other remains from larger animals were also uncovered. Therefore, these early Homo sapiens were living at the edges of northern conifer-dominated boreal forests, where there were few edible plants and animals. Winters were severe, with short daylight hours. Life was tough for these early pioneers, living close to the cold northern pine forests. There were few edible plants and animals to hunt, harsh winters, and rhino and hyena on the prowl too. In May 2013, footprints were found on a beach at Happisburgh in a newly uncovered sediment layer on the beach. Found along the then Thames estuary, they were made by a small band family that had been walking through a river valley. In that valley grazed mammoths, hippos, and rhinoceroses. The pattern of the prints suggests at least 5 individuals were heading southward, pausing and pottering about to gather plants or shellfish along the bank, and they included children. The best preserved prints clearly showing heel, arch, and 4 toes. One toe may not have left a clear impression. It is of a man with a foot equivalent to a modern size 8 shoe, suggesting a height of about 5 foot 9 inches. Footprints were eventually destroyed by the tide, and they are dated between 950,000 and 850,000 BP from the overlying sedimentary layers and glacial deposits, and the fossil remains of extinct animals, including mammoth, an extinct type of horse, and an early form of vole. Then we come to the Pakefield site. In 2000, scientists found a loose flint on the beach sands of Pakefield. In the winter of 2001, when a storm raged, 2 avocational investigators found the Pakefield archaeological site. Paul Durbridge and Bob Much had been collecting paleontological specimens on this beach for years. They knew their animal fossils from Pakefield were old. What if we have flints here like the ones at Hattiesburg? Now there's, one of them said, now there's a dark layer of clay that can be seen intermittently along the coastal cliffs of Norfolk and Suffolk called the Cromer Forest Bed Formation. It got its name from ancient tree stumps. Now for over 200 years it has been popular with collectors for its copious fossils of mammoth, saber-toothed cat, bison, and other exotic animals. The coast south of Lowestoft is Bob Much's stomping ground, and he began collecting fossils there as a youngster living in the Southwold area. In 1994 there was a big storm. He said, quote, "There was tons of material everywhere," unquote. During a big winter storm, the beach can disappear for a period as suddenly the ground drops by several meters. On those rare occasions when everything goes right, ancient gravel-filled river channels are exposed, packed with animal bones. Much describes running about, picking up fossils in a frenzy while the tide rolls around and cliffs slump into the waves. Late in 2001, during an excavation, they found a small flint flake. The hand of one of the very first Europeans had shaped that little chip of flint. Durbridge and Much excavated small sections at the bottom of the cliff. They were thorough. We had to map it all. Adrian Charlton did the spade work. He stands up to his knees in cold water, works his backside off. He loves sieving, unquote. Then came the flint. It was pure luck, said Durbridge. We'd done 3 small sections, and we found our first flint flake. I knew what it was, said Much. It was crisp, stood out a mile. They sent it to the Natural History Museum and got an excited letter back. You appear to have hit the jackpot. In 2003, a small team that included members of the Ancient Human Occupation of Britain, AHOB or AHOB, a project involving scientists from institutions across the United Kingdom, came to Bakefield to excavate. AHOB found 3 more flints, perfectly sealed, in the clay alongside animal fossils. Simon Parfitt, a small mammals expert at the Natural History Museum and University College of London, had also been looking for signs of early humans on the East Anglian coast. In 1998, he had found the first, ironically, on a bison bone that had been in the museum's collection since 1897. Now, the bone had microscopic cuts on it that could only have been made by a flint butchery knife. His quest, like that of Durbridge and Much, had brought him and Ahab to Pakefield. Not only was he hoping for flints, but also the supportive evidence those large mammals had been taken apart with stone tools. He wanted the bones of a butchered mammoth. Parfitt and colleagues sieved everything they dug up, some of it in the lab in London, and over the next few months sorted the thousands of tiny fragments under a microscope. Quote, "There was a huge quantity of small mammals," he says, including such exotics as a very rare extinct aquatic shrew, unquote. Bats and squirrels, hamsters, and most significantly, the vole species known to have died out some 700,000 years ago. They had no butchered beasts yet, but they were now confident of the great age, the association with flint tools, and the nature of the landscape and fauna at that remote date. Spotted hyena, Crocuta crocuta, coprolites from 4 British Pleistocene sites are analyzed for their pollen content, coprolites being desiccated feces. At the 2 open sites, the palynology was compared to that of the surrounding sediments. The results provide palynological data supported by other lines of evidence, enabling reconstruction of human environments, and they provide insight into the taphonomic complexities of the incorporation of pollen into coprolites. Pollen presence and preservation are closely related to mammalian behavior as well as post-depositional processes. However, geological age is not a significant factor. Samples from 2 of these sites are amongst the earliest known from the Pleistocene to provide viable coprolite-derived pollen counts. These 32 Pakefield flint flakes prove humans had been there. The animal bones, plant remains, beetles, and sediment samples allowed paleo-environmental reconstruction. There was a wilderness with broad-leafed woodlands. It opened onto a marsh around a meandering, fish-rich river with pike, fresh and brackish water, cyprinid tench fish, tinca tinca, and rudd, Sardinius erythrophthalmus. Then a lion might have roared and hyenas whooped. A mammoth could have crashed through the undergrowth on its way to the river, upsetting the hippos, sunning themselves on the bank. Their roster of creatures would have made a theme park draw with envy. An extinct giant beaver, wild boar, 3 different extinct giant deer, a giant moose, an extinct bison, 2 species of horse, an extinct rhino, the enormous straight-tusked elephant, larger than any elephant alive today, and the mammoth itself, an ancestor of the smaller woolly mammoth of the later ice ages. Paul Durbridge and Bob Much had just proved that humans were there, probably so few as to have gone unnoticed by most of the animals whose chief concerns were the more vicious carnivores, the lion, spotted hyena, wolf, bear, and the spectacular saber-toothed cat. In fact, humans were so rare, it's normal in such work to find a huge range of animal but no fossil humans. And that takes us to the site of Box Grove. Amy's Eartham Pit is the original name for the lower Paleolithic sea cliff and beach archaeological site of Box Grove in the English county of West Sussex, with flint tools 500,000 years old. In 1994 and 1995, 500,000-year-old human fossils were discovered there. They are the oldest such fossils ever discovered in the UK. Parts of the site complex were excavated between 1982 and 1996 by a team led by Mark Roberts of the Institute of Archaeology, University College London. The site is situated in an area that features a buried chalk cliff that overlooks a flat beach, which contained a water hole stretching around a half-mile to the sea. The site is important for many reasons, including the degree of preservation of ancient land surfaces. These include an impressive paleo landscape that beyond having quarries 16 miles wide, also contained huge quantities of well-preserved animal bones. Among them are flint artifacts and human bones, some of the most ancient found yet in Europe. Several of the animal bones are the oldest found specimens of their species, such as the wing bone of the great auk, found at the site in 1989. The combination of bones, stone artifacts, and the geology of the landscape give a very complete picture of the coastal plain as it was 500,000 years ago. Numerous Acheulean flint tools and remains of animals dating to around 500,000 years ago were found at the site. Some of the bones were found to display cut marks, and some of the tools bear use-wear traces, indicative of cutting meat, indicating that the site was used for butchery. These human hunting and gathering bands shared the area with a variety of animals whose bones have been found there. Among them were the lion, bear, rhino, and giant deer, as well as numerous smaller animals such as frogs, voles, and birds. Comparison with ethnographic and experimental examples of stone tool-assisted butchery has shown that game animals at Box Grove were expertly butchered, and it is likely that the variety of animal life in the area attracted human hunters. In 1993, the bones of Homo Sapiens heidelbergensis were found on the site, specifically the partial tibia of a male who probably stood 5 foot 9 inches high and weighed 176 pounds. Significantly, this is the only postcranial element of Homo sapiens heidelbergensis to have been found in northern Europe. Both ends of the bone show signs of gnawing, possibly by a wolf, suggesting that perhaps the Box Grove people were sometimes prey to other animals, or that the wolf exhumed the corpse. In 1995, 2 incisor teeth from another individual were found. These show evidence of severe periodontal disease and show tool cut marks, which were thought to have been used by the use of flint tools near the mouth, indicating an attempt to cure the disease. Cut marks observed on fossil bones and teeth are an important source of evidence of the reconstruction of prehistoric butchery strategies. Micromorphological analysis of cut marks have been shown to further the interpretation of human behavioral patterns. A new technology using the Aliconin 3D infinite focus imaging microscope surpasses previous observational or microscopic method for the analysis of cut marks. By creating a series of image planes and overlapping focus levels to construct a 3D composite image, vertical variations in the surface structure can be used to interpret differences in the mechanical impact caused by different types of tool and different butchery techniques. Cut marks observed on the human anterior teeth from Box Grove are indications of the use of the mouth as a third hand and post-mortem treatment of the body. There is evidence from bones and flint tools found in coastal deposits near Happisburgh in Norfolk and Pakefield in Suffolk. Homo sapiens was present in what is now Britain at least 814,000 years ago, and at this time southern and eastern Britain were linked to continental Europe by a very wide land bridge called Doggerland that allowed them to move freely back and forth. The current position of the English Channel was a large river flowing westward and then fed by tributaries that later became the Thames and the Seine. Reconstructing this ancient environment has provided clues to the route people took to arrive at what was then a peninsula of the Eurasian continent. Archaeologists have found a string of early sites located close to the route of a now lost watercourse named the Bytham River, which indicate that it was the earliest route west into Britain. Sites such as Box Grove in Sussex illustrate the later arrival in the archaeological record of Homo sapiens heidelbergensis around 500,000 years ago. These early peoples continued making a stone tool kit with Acheulean flint tool hand axes. They hunted the large native mammals, driving elephants, rhinoceroses, and hippopotamuses over the tops of cliffs or into bogs. Apparently, these people abandoned Britain during the extreme cold of the following Anglian stage. Britain was not occupied again until the ice receded during the Hoxnean stage. This warmer period lasted from about 424,000 until 374,000 BP. When they did return, they left behind stone tools of the Clactonian industry at sites such as Swanscombe in Kent. This period has produced a rich and widespread distribution of Paleolithic sites, and the British Lower Paleolithic, as much as in Northern Europe, is a long record of abandonment and colonization and intermittent, very short residency. Now, as to mammal associations in the Pleistocene of Britain, quaternary investigators David Pauly et al. Published a 2011 report on Pleistocene mammal associations of their concomitant climate and geographic ranges in the journal Developments in Quaternary Science, Volume 14. And the abstract follows, quote, "The climatic envelope of a species is a multivariate space whose axes are climatic variables and whose boundaries are the upper and lower values of those variables that occur within the species' geographic range. If climate limits the geographic ranges of species, then the climate envelope can be used to predict which ones will occur together in a paleofauna, or to reconstruct paleoclimate based on the species found in a fossil site. We evaluated these possibilities using 10 living mammal species, 4 that are now found in cold climates, and then it lists the scientific names, 3 that are now found in warm climates, and then the scientific names, and 3 that are broadly spread through temperate climates. The World Clim data set of 19 climatic variables was used to characterize climate distributions for the 10 species. Out of the 45 possible pairings of the 10 species, 22 pairs have geographic ranges that do not overlap, but only 12 pairs have climatic envelopes that do not overlap. We looked at 22 paleofaunas from the British Quaternary Paleofauna. 44% of them had species whose climatic envelopes do not overlap today. These are climatically non-analog or disharmonious faunas, whereas 82% of the faunas had species whose geographic ranges do not overlap. These are geographically non-analog faunas. The index of disharmony, when a geographic non-overlap was used as a criterion, is higher than in similar aged North American faunas, but only when climatic non-overlap was used. A maximum likelihood function was used to estimate the most probable climate for the 22 paleofaunas based on modern climatic distribution of the 10 species. The reconstructions were generally compatible with other quantitative estimates of paleoclimate at the same sites. Now we go to the Middle Paleolithic in the British Isles. That is characterized as usual by level wall flint tools. However, finds from Swanscombe and Botany Pit in Purfleet prove level wall technology was of European origin. This more advanced stone tool technology made hunting more efficient and Britain a more worthwhile place to remain until the following period of cooling, known as the Wolstonian stage, 352,000 to 130,000 BP. Britain first became an island about 350,000 years ago. Early Homo Sapiens neanderthalensis remains discovered at the Potnuad cave in Wales have been dated to 230,000 BP. From 180,000 to 60,000 BP, there is no evidence of human occupation in Britain, Britain being cut off as an island, and the neighboring areas of northwest Europe were similarly unoccupied. Now we come to the Upper Paleolithic. The earlier Upper Paleolithic human record from the British Isles has been transformed by new radiocarbon determinations from the British Isles, and more recently from sites in continental Europe. Together with observations on artifact technology and change, they show a complex human history with at least 6 settlement events. The quantity of archaeological evidence appears to diminish with each such event, that happening as the last glacial maximum approached. That suggests that climatic deterioration became a greater influence on the presence of humans, although their technological ability to cope to colder conditions steadily improved. The Upper Paleolithic is divided into 3 subperiods: the early Upper Paleolithic before the main glacial epoch, the middle Upper Paleolithic in the main glacial epoch, and the late Upper Paleolithic after the main glacial period. There was limited Homo sapiens neanderthalensis occupation of Britain in marine isotope stage 3 between about 60,000 and 40,000 years BP. At that time, Britain had its own unique variety of late Neanderthal Andax called the boat coop. Seasonal migration between Britain and the continent is unlikely. The main area of occupation may have been in the now submerged Doggerland, with summer migration to Britain in warmer periods. La Côte de Saint-Brelade in Jersey in the British Isles has Homo sapiens neanderthalensis fossils. The earliest human evidence in northwest Europe is a jawbone discovered in England at Hent's Cavern in 1927, now dated between 44,000 and 41,000 years ago. The most famous example from this period is the burial of the, quote, Red Lady of Poviland, unquote, actually now known to be a man, in modern-day coastal South Wales, that was redated in 2009 to 33,000 years old. The distribution of finds shows that humans in this period preferred the uplands of Wales and northern and western England to the flatter areas of eastern England. Their stone tools are similar to those of the same age found in Belgium and far northeast France, and very different from those in northwest France. At a time when Britain was not an island, hunter-gatherers may have followed migrating herds of reindeer from Belgium and northeast France across the giant Channel River. Now, the climatic deterioration that culminated in the last glacial maximum between about 26,500 and 19,000 to 20,000 BP drove humans out of Britain. There is no evidence of occupation for around 18,000 years afterwards, 33,000 years BP, and sites such as the Cathole Cave in Swansea County, dated at 14,500 BP, Creswell Crags on the border between Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire at 12,800 BP, and Goes Cave in Somerset at 12,000 years BP, prove humans returned to Britain intermittently at the end of this ice age. That was during a warm period from 14,700 to 12,900 years BP of the Bowling-Ileron Interstadial, known as the Windermere Interstadial in Britain. The environment during this ice age period was largely treeless tundra that was eventually replaced by a gradually warmer climate, reaching 63 degrees Fahrenheit in summer, encouraging the expansion of birch trees as well as shrubs and grasses. The first distinct culture of the Upper Paleolithic in Britain is what archaeologists call the Creswellian industry, with leaf-shaped points probably used as arrowheads. It produced more refined flint tools, but also made use of bone, antler, shell, amber, animal teeth, and mammoth ivory. These materials were made into tools and jewelry, as well as fishing rods, where locally absent flint was imported. The stone tools found in the caves of Devon, such as Kent's Cavern, were sourced from the Salisbury Plain, 100 miles to the east. Obviously, people were roaming over wide distances and carrying toolkits of flint blades with them. These flint-finished tools were made from heavy flint nodules, in other words, in other locales. In the course of this activity, people encountered each other. Now, the dominant food species were equines, Equus ferus, and red deer, Cervus elephas, although other mammals ranging from rabbits to mammoth were also hunted, including rhino and hyena. From the limited evidence available, burial seems to involve skinning and dismembering a corpse with the bones placed in caves. This suggests a practice of excarnation and secondary burial, and possibly some form of ritual cannibalism. Artistic expression seems to have been mostly limited to engraved bone, although the cave art at Creswell Crags and Mendip caves are notable exceptions. Between about 12,890 and 11,650 years ago, Britain returned to glacial conditions during the Younger Dryas. It may have been unoccupied for varying periods. The chronological evidence from the British Isles for later Upper Paleolithic recolonization as revealed by ultrafiltered radiocarbon age determinations on bone collagen, predicts this. Using Bayesian modeling, subtle differences in age and duration of occupation are apparent find spots. Now it's possible to demonstrate the occupation of two areas, Cheddar Gorge and the Wye Valley, as beginning before the sudden warming of the late glacial interstadium. We can associate a final Magdalenian or Creswellian with this recolonization. In so doing, it can be shown that this technology had a longer time span than previously had been allowed, meaning it lasted through most of the Greenland interstadial, 1E, that is the bowling. Now, cut marks on human remains at the later Upper Paleolithic Magdalenian site of Goes Cave in Somerset, England, negate the interpretation of cannibalism previously made for this site. Rather, we may hypothesize a burial ritual involving the butchering but not the consumption of human bodies. The butchery techniques adopted at Boxgrove and Goes Cave indicate the differences in the micromorphological characteristics of cut marks reflect diversity in the type of tools used at these sites. Preparation for revolution. The Epipaleolithic, initial Mesolithic, 11,000 to 9,500 years BP. The Younger Dryas was followed by the Holocene that began around 11,700 BP and continues to the present. Then there was a limited occupation by the Arnsbergian hunter-gatherers. It ended simultaneously with the final downturn in temperatures from 11,400 to 11,200 BP. Mesolithic people occupied Britain by around 11,000 BP. And it has been occupied ever since. By 10,000 BP, temperatures were higher than today, and birch woodlands spread rapidly. The warmer climate changed the Arctic environment to one of pine, birch, and alder forest. This less open landscape was less conducive to the large herds of reindeer and wild horse that had previously sustained humans. Those animals were replaced in people's diets by pig and less social animals such as elk, red deer, roe deer, wild boar, and oryx, wild cattle, which would have required different hunting techniques. Tools now incorporated barbed projectile points which could snag the flesh of an animal, making it harder for it to escape alive. Tiny microliths used before became even more important for hafting onto harpoons and spears. Woodworking tools such as adzes appear in the archaeological record. Flint blade types remained similar to their Paleolithic predecessors. Domesticated dogs were more important during hunting and in the warmer weather wetland environments. Humans reached the far north of Scotland during this period. Sites from the British Mesolithic include the Mendips, Star Cave in Yorkshire, and Oronsay in the Inner Hebrides. Excavations at Hawick in Northumberland uncovered evidence of a large circular building dating to 9600 BP that is interpreted as a dwelling. Another example comes from Starcar, dated to 10,800 BP, and people lived in semi-permanent villages, traveling shorter distances, moving seasonally between high and low ground. Experimentation with horticulture got underway as the logical conclusion to their broad-spectrum wild resource exploitation, and this is proven on the Isle of Wight, where a variety of wheat grown in the Middle East was present at the Bulmer Glyph Mesolithic village dating from about 10,000 years ago. Though the Mesolithic environment was of a bounteous nature, the rising population and the ancient Britain's success in exploiting it eventually led to local exhaustion of many natural resources. The remains of a Mesolithic elk found caught in a bog at Poulton le Field in Lancashire show that it had been wounded by hunters and escaped on 3 occasions. And that brings us to the conclusion of our discussion of the primitive communism of the Paleolithic hunting and gathering variety in the British Isles. And in our next lecture, we're going to move on to Eastern Europe and its Paleolithic, and in the one following that to the Neolithic Revolution And we're going to begin that in Eastern Europe because that is the earliest appearance of it.